Hello, everybody. My name is Lee Carroll, and this is another one of our series of free shows, and I hope you're going to enjoy it. Audience, are you there? That really is a live audience, and so just to let you know, that's not a recording. And they have come to hear and see something that's very special. So I don't want to take much time away from our guest. You're looking at her right now. And I want to give you an introduction that is would seem to be fairly lengthy, but she deserves it, and you're going to know why in just a moment. This is Cheryl Dembe. We're going to call her Sundari from now on. That's the name that she wants to be called. She taught at Diablo Valley College for 37 years, serving 3 times as department chair, as well as interim division chair of physical science and engineering. She taught at UC Berkeley on a sabbatical, and previously she had taught at Holy Names College, Langley, and College of Marin. Now she's teaching chemistry. This is one smart woman. Listen to this, though. This is where it gets good. She was the first woman chemist, first woman chemistry department chair, first woman physical science division chair as an interim, as well as one of the first women to have children while teaching. I'm not going to go there yet. I know it's inappropriate, but it sounds messy to me. Okay. She had, thank you for laughing. She had ancillary materials published to accompany The World of Chemistry, which was a 26-episode television series hosted by Nobel laureate Ronald Hoffman. And there are a lot of musical credentials we're not even going to get into. This woman has done everything, including farming. The more we talk to her, the more we realize what she's done. Most important, and you're going to hear this lady talk about this, she has a book, and it's called The Choice of Happiness, Glimpses from an Extraordinary, Ordinary Scientific Mystical Life. And she has a whopper of a story, and that is why we're here. Not to give it away totally, but I'm going to give it away totally. We are calling this and naming this, and you saw this in order to watch it, 48 years later. And what this is a story is of how this happened, that she would earn a PhD right to the point of the dissertation, right to the point of writing it up, and then be denied it. And then what happened, and then what happened, and then what happened, in order for today, for her to sit there and have it as an actual earned, not honorary like mine, PhD. So this is exciting for me, and this is why I wanted her here today. Sundari, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you, everybody.
I hesitate to say you're born in Cleveland.
I was.
Not only that, because being in Cleveland used to be a joke.
That was when the Cuyahoga River caught fire and melted the railroad tracks above it. And,
yes. And this was a time, I think, when we were, the Race to the Moon was on. Am I right about that?
It was. When I was going through school, science was respected, honored. We were trying to plug in a lot of research monies. And so I had the benefit of going through with an amazing education where I was tracked in 7th grade, and it ended up that I had a math class, so we had algebra in 7th grade, and we had to do formal deductive and inductive proofs before we ever used a theorem. And we were with people who were both scientific, musical, and great books in general. So it was a wonderful time for education.
Did you have anybody during that time who was special, a teacher or something that was...
I sure did, Lee.
Funny I would ask that.
In high school, I had this wonderful role model of a woman chemistry teacher. Mrs. Bernard was her name. And she was both attractive, interesting, solid in science, and we would even do sing-alongs as part of our chemistry curriculum.
Sing-alongs?
Yes. There would be, she taught us the solubility chart for net ionics as a song.
It's a song?
Yes. And I just kept on through my career with my students.
We've set you up now because you've just told us that there's going to be a song.
Yes.
And I'm going to make you sing it. Not now.
Okay.
Not now.
Mrs. Bernard's solubility chart for ionic
solubility.
equations.
What for? Net ionics?
Right, for understanding whether substances break up into ions or stay stuck together when you put them in solution. So the net reaction that happens when
Of course, I understand all of that.
Yes.
You know, I understand that you were actually in 7th grade. You loved math. Whatever mathematics they presented there, you were on it. So in 7th grade, I majored in playground and looking at the girls. And you were already doing math.
Yes.
Would you say, I like people to know kind of when this occurred to you that you might be more interested in math than the other kids?
Well, it was at that point, as I said, and somehow it was okay in the track system to be both a woman, to be interested in math, to be interested in science. Mm-hmm. And I was with just a group of passionate kids. We would take, in high school, we took Bach fugues and we put physics lyrics to them to memorize physics equations using Bach, and they even put together a operetta that was later performed at Oberlin Music College of a combination of Moby Dick and the Scarlet Letter. So people were, it was a very creative, kooky, people who wouldn't necessarily fit in, but because we were with each other, it was inspiring.
You went to the University of Michigan.
I did.
Anything you want to tell us about that? This is where you got your chemistry degree.
It was very solid. I majored in chemistry. I was actually placed out of first semester chemistry because of the AP courses I'd had in high school. So I was a little off sync there for a while, starting out, the second half of the semester.
Yeah.
And actually right before I went to Michigan, while I was still in high school, John F. Kennedy was assassinated, mm-hmm. and I was thinking of going to Cornell, but I ended up at Michigan because I went there to see the school that weekend that he was assassinated, and I just so bonded with the place that sharing that with the people there, that I ended up going there and was extraordinarily happy with my education there. Felt like it was very solid.
How many years does it take to get a chemistry degree in Michigan State?
No, it wasn't Michigan State.
Oh, sorry.
It was the Ann Arbor.
There's probably
Those
a
are the
Michigan State
football
too.
rivals.
Now I'm going to hear from everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, just 4 years.
4 years?
The normal 4 years.
All right.
Right.
After Michigan, I think this is kind of like where it starts to begin. What happened?
It does. The times were amazing. Right near the end of high school, Martin Luther King was assassinated April 8th of that year. Then I was working in Holland. I'd worked 2 summers in chemical industry and in Cleveland for this Harshaw Chemical Company, and they set me up in Utrecht, Nederland. And there I worked, I was doing a study of different complexing agents for zinc electroplating solutions. My first day there, I walked into the lab, and there were all the chemicals, no formulas, all the names in Dutch, and so I had to learn the Zoutzuur and the Zwefelzuur and the natrium hydrox. Robert Kennedy was assassinated while I was over there, and then right before I started Chicago, Michigan ended early, Chicago started late. And so right before I started was the Democratic Convention in August of that year. And there were tens of thousands of people protesting the Vietnam War. And so there were, it ended up being very bloody and chaotic and violent. And there was a group of people in the Chicago 7 were arrested. One of them was Bobby Searles, who started the Black Panthers, Abby Hoffman, a whole group of people. And so at the point, I'm not a political person, but I came into Chicago at a time where the community there was a great deal of unease and a great deal of discomfort between police and African American community. The University of Chicago is located in exactly the same spot that Barack Obama grew up in South Side of Chicago. And I think it was the moment where that African-American community police unease was seated. And at the same time, it was the first moment, my class, when the students were no longer draft deferred. And so the University of Chicago at that point was worried in the chemistry department about losing students, losing the men. And so I was told by my roommate, just in going through this process, that our class was stuffed with women, our graduate class. That meant 7 of us out of 46 graduate students at the time. And they were a really tough school.
So this is your graduate, you're doing graduate at the University of Chicago at the moment. This is what you're talking about.
Yes, my first year there.
Can I continue? But in that, I want you to tell, why'd you go to Chicago? I mean, you were in Michigan. So, but continue the rest and then we'll get back to that.
Well, do you want me to?
Sure.
I'll just answer that. I had a boyfriend.
I knew it.
This was a guy from Cleveland, and I always knew Cleveland wasn't the place I belonged. I just knew it. I think one of my major career goals was not growing up to be a housewife in Cleveland. And he was very ensconced there, and I really loved the guy, and I just couldn't break up with him. And so I applied to 3 graduate schools, and Chicago was the farthest in distance, because I could see us getting married and going on 7 years, and then my needing to, I don't know, take flight, you know. I just knew that it would lock me into the wrong place. And so I went to the farthest school, just far enough away where we couldn't keep up a good, you know, relationship. And I actually knew that guy. He died a couple years ago, and we were good friends up until the day he died. An engineer who was also a race car driver.
He's an engineer.
Yes.
Back to the, it's fascinating, the number of women that were in the chemistry and how many made it.
Oh, so of the 46, just after the first year where there was only, we had done all our classes and we had done our orals, and there was no privacy those days. You'd go up and you'd see the list of you didn't make it, you made it, you didn't make it, you made it by name. And so of the 46, 23 remained after the classes as 6 women. And so it was a pretty tough program. It was,
There's a demarcation point in every show where we start to get to the meat of what we're talking about. And so far, this is just kind of the background. It's an impressive one. It really is.
Thank you.
So you are there, you have your degree, you have the graduate class, and you are about ready to do research.
Right.
Okay, how does this work for a PhD? You're going to do research.
Well, you have to find an advisor who's willing to sponsor you, and basically they each have their research areas, so you can't really just come up with a project and do it. You have to fit into somebody's research grants and such, and I think there was some nervousness about that because we were hitting the moon around then, and although a lot of money was plugged into science before then, after we hit the moon, I think people were feeling nervous about their research monies. So I think as a woman, I wasn't exactly on the top of people's list. And I ended up in a project that I probably wouldn't have chosen. It was in superfluidity. And I was working with...
I've written down here, you tell me if it's right or wrong, because sometimes I don't get it right. Overview of quantized vortices, magnetic properties, and superfluid liquid helium.
That's it.
Is that it?
Yes. So my research basically had 3 components to it. The first component was I developed the coldest stable system in the world. And there's a point below which, to which you can't get, and that's called absolute zero. And even if you have any motion at all, even an electron going around an atom, you'll have some degree of heat produced, and so you can't get to this total absolute zero. So I developed a system that would stay at 0.02 from absolute zero
that's
for a
Kelvin.
month.
That's Kelvin.
Kelvin, 0.02 Kelvin, yes. And
That in itself is extremely impressive. If we were in a group of science-minded people, I think that alone, they would go, "You're kidding," because that's a tough one. When we did our first interview, being the nerd I am,
right.
You developed the thermometer, if you want to call it that, or the heat sensor, or the cold sensor.
I did that as well.
You actually invented. Can I? Yeah.
Well.
Okay. For those nerds who are watching, would you describe that?
Sure. And actually,
I'm sorry. Did I insult you saying you're?
No.
I'm a nerd. You're a professor.
I was wanting to talk about superfluidity, just
do
so
it.
people.
Do superfluidity, and then tell us about the thermometer.
So I developed this cold system by mixing two isotopes of helium. And helium, any element is that element because it's got a certain number of protons, these things in the nucleus that have a +1 charge. And they also can have neutrons in the nucleus, about the same weight, what's called atomic mass unit, but no charge. So normal helium, it's the second element. First element is hydrogen with 1 proton, and then helium has 2 protons. And those 2 protons okay, so the normal one has 2 neutrons, so it weighs 4. And one of them has 1 neutron and weighs 3. And when you mix these 2 isotopes of helium together, they make cold, just like a cold pack. And the helium-3 is lighter, so it has a higher vapor pressure, so I'd pull it off with a pump, mix it into the other helium, it would get colder, pull it off, mix it in, and eventually it would stabilize at 0.02. Then I needed to measure what temperature, at 4 degrees Kelvin, helium becomes a liquid, the only element not to become a solid at normal pressures. And if you go down to 2.17 degrees Kelvin, it acts like it has no friction. The helium will crawl up walls of containers, and that's the superfluid. And the reason this is jumping, but
that's all right.
The reason this experiment ended up being important cosmically is at the moment of the Big Bang, just after the Big Bang, they postulate a plasmatic nature of the universe that approximates this superfluid. So it ended up having some pertinence.
Was anybody studying this before your research project where you were doing it?
Yes, there have been actually 3 Nobel Prizes
before
awarded.
you?
No.
That's the question. One before you.
1.
Okay.
Yes.
So the actual study of superfluidity at these temperatures was something unique?
It was. Mm-hmm. It was mainly that I developed such a cold system, and then I had a magnetic salt. And maybe one reason I'm here.
Right.
And in order to measure temperature, I put a current through a wire around that magnetic salt, and then another wire, and measured the induced current in that. And that's what allowed me to measure the temperature of the region, is it turned out the induced circuit was proportional to the temperature.
I want to say the reason we are studying this, and I'm letting her go on things that most people don't understand, is because this becomes literally the crux of what we're talking about. The brilliance it took to get here, the study for the PhD, and basically I would say the next thing is you've done your research, unless you want to tell us any more about it.
Go ahead. Okay, just that then I zapped the nucleus of a helium atom through this little cell, and vortices formed, like water going down a drain. And the interesting part was they had energies of 1 times something, 2 times something, 3 times something, but nothing in between, which is a primary meaning of the word quantized. It's like a step ladder where there's an all-at-once information, all-at-once jump going on. And so those were the quantized vortices I studied, the magnetic properties of quantized vortices.
See, when you talk like that, I just melt. I'm sorry, but this is, I probably should. That's the, Professor, I'm a nerd. What can I say?
I've hit it all these years, and now.
I know. Okay, you're there, you're the grad student.
Right.
You have done enough research so that your research guy says to you, enough, write it up. And now that means, does that mean prepare your thesis?
Right. It means you're completed with the project, you have enough data, I think you've gotten somewhere, time to just write it up, you're done. And then...
This is interesting to me because things happen all at once to us. And sometimes we look back and we wonder why. And we have a number of things that happened all at once to you.
All at once.
All of them profound to the degree that some people might even check out. I mean, honestly, this is really critical stuff. I want you to explain what happened to him and then what happened after.
Okay, so he died 10 days later. So he told me I was done, died 10 days later. 3 days after that, the department came to me and said, sorry, Miss Dembe, but the next fellow who could take over your research refuses because he won't have a woman in his research group. You're going to need to start your project again, new project, new advisor. You're just going to have to start over.
Start over.
And then 1 week to the day that he died, someone broke into my locked apartment in the night and assaulted me. And the department sent me flowers for being assaulted. But for the next 3 months, although I was paying tuition and I received no guidance, supervision, or instruction.
You said something to me when we were talking, and I put it in italics and quotes because I want to read it, and I want you to comment on it. There was no gender equity, and I think the men of the department were uncomfortable interacting with a young woman who had been assaulted. That's profound.
You know, this was before the days when one could talk about assault. And I remember years later when the little signs appeared in ladies' restrooms inside the stall saying, if you've been assaulted, you know, you can call this number. But no one even thought about getting counseling back then, or it just wasn't something you talked about. So I think the men didn't want me.
And
all this who wanted a woman in their research group where they're going to have these weird thoughts all the time? Or,
but
you know,
it's happening simultaneously with your, what I'll call it, the turn down of the PhD. I want to know, how did you handle that? I mean, what were you thinking when you were turned down and they said, you know, it's not for you, you have to start again, they didn't want a woman in it? I mean, did you think, I'm going to fight this? Did you think no? Or, you know, where were you at that point?
This was actually the year before gender equity. So it never crossed my mind.
All right.
Somehow, whatever they said, you did it.
Okay.
You know, and I was very scientific research focused, and they wanted me to start over again. I'd have to start over again. So I never thought to question it. Never even crossed my mind.
So let's jump. You get 3 months later, you've decided to move on.
Right.
Okay, so you're going to apply for a teaching position and be a professor of chemistry. At least that's the idea?
I actually was so overwhelmed, I just took a 3-week vacation to a 1-week vacation to California and found...
Good call, good call.
Because I had sat there literally reading the newspaper every day, all day for 3 months, and it was ridiculous. And then all at once, I ran into a full-time college teaching position, got it 3 days after I landed in California. And I thought, I'll go there, teach for a couple of years, and figure out how to progress.
Well, this is where you taught your students the solubility song.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And now, So I'm going to ask
Have
you
no idea.
to sing a little of it. Now it has multiple verses, and we're going to ask you just to
does.
sing the one. And
Just the one.
do you have your phone there for a pitch? I
I
know you're
do.
musical and
I
all.
do.
And just take your time. If you want to sing it, we'd like to hear it.
So, sodium, potassium, ammonium salts, wherever they may be, can always be depended on for solubility. When asked about the nitrates, the answer's always clear. They each and all are soluble, is all we want to hear. Now, every chloride's soluble, at least 'tis often said, save silver, mercurous, mercury, and slightly chloride of lead. Should I go on?
Yes.
Every single sulfate is soluble, it's said, save calcium and barium and strontium and lead. Hydroxides of metals won't dissolve. That is all but 3. Sodium, potassium, ammonium dissolved quite readily. And then you must remember that you must not forget strontium, calcium, ammonium dissolve a little bit.
All right.
Wait,
Okay,
the
just a minute.
carbonate's insoluble.
She's not done.
It's lucky that it's so, or else our marble buildings, calcium carbonate, would melt away like snow.
Hey, all right. Yeah. All right. That is just, that's awesome. This is where I want to stand up and go, okay, everybody, let's, but this is, and so you used music as a teaching tool because we all know we can remember things, the lyrics to songs where we can't remember other things. And this
Right.
was your holdover from the woman in high school
Mrs. Bernard.
who taught you this. All right. 19 years ago, 20 now, at the year 2000, you met somebody.
I did. I was in a class on women in science on a sabbatical. And while I was there, I was reading up on Nobel Prize winners in chemistry and physics. And all of a sudden, I was completely stunned because a man named Douglas Ocheroff won the Nobel Prize in 1996 for what looked to me like exactly my research. And it was published 2 years after I would have published. Not taking my research, just parallel.
He's working on the same thing.
We're
Yeah,
right, at different schools.
Right.
So I went to the journals. It still looked like my research. So I called him on the phone. He was at Stanford now. And he said, oh, yeah, I heard about you guys and your work. And you should have gotten your degree. Write Chicago. I'll support you in that. And it was his encouragement that led me to write the chemistry department at the University of Chicago. And so I wrote them and never received an answer.
Nothing.
Nothing. And so I just went on with my life yet again.
What did he think about that?
I didn't recontact him
Okay.
until I tried recently, but at this point he has dementia.
Okay.
Yeah,
So that's fascinating to me that you
Yeah.
have the same subject, the same research. You got a Nobel for it.
he did.
Okay. When I was interviewing you, can I just say there was no sense of remorse. I should have got it from you. There's just nothing.
Right.
And this plays into your book. It plays into what we're going to talk about later and who you are. And that's what I think people are learning, who you are. So you applied, or not applied, you asked them, you wrote a letter 20 years ago, and nothing happened. Now, what's next?
Well, you know, I feel like saying when things happen to us, we can either hold on to that or move on. And really, it was a gift in my life. I think I ended up having a more balanced life, a more interested life. I never would have written a book called The Choice of Happiness. It was the pain of that situation that led me into places where I learned how to stabilize my own happiness and to operate. So, okay, so You know, I think
I'm going to say
I think of
CERN.
CERN.
Yeah, we just to let people know, we had a series of conferences at CERN, the accelerator, and Greg Braden was there, you were there, and all. You've got pictures and all. What happened there that impacted you?
So this was a critical moment along this journey to the PhD for me. So at CERN, two things happened. One thing was I became shocked that the research happening there was so similar to what I did. They working at 1.9 Kelvin. I was working at 0.02 Kelvin. They're accelerating protons, the smallest atom. I was accelerating alpha particle. I was accelerating out the center of helium atoms. So, and then Greg Braden showed a tape, and I'd seen it before even, and it was the journey of Edgar Mitchell around the dark side of the moon. And I think because I'd seen it before, I took a step back, and all of a sudden I was completely shocked because every bit of the key moments of my story happened while Edgar Mitchell was going around the dark side of the moon. My advisor dying, being told to start over from scratch again, being assaulted, all that, my personal dark night of the soul, occurred exactly at the same time that the planet itself was focused on the darkness, on wondering when they went around the dark side of the moon if the equipment all went off, the capsule went cold and dark, and everyone was wondering, would it go on again? Would there be light again? And somehow in that moment, the holographic fractal nature of the specificity of each of our lives became apparent to me. How we're each fitting in our difficult moments into this amazing pattern of existence. And with that catalytic input, it uplifted my life. And I think it gave me a perspective, a pulled back perspective that allowed me to move forward in a different way and feel my value in creation, even at the difficult times. And then you had channeled to me, go to Carcassonne at one point. And so after CERN, I ended up going to Carcassonne and then ended up in Paris. And somehow at every point of my journey, Marie Curie has come up for me, both as an inspiration. Right before I discovered Doug Osheroff's existence in 2000. I had been at Marie Curie's tomb just before, and it was in a few months after that that I wrote the president of the University of Chicago again.
So that was the catalyst to ask you, internally to write again for the same thing. You're gonna so going to CERN, seeing all this, all that recognition, that realization, that self-awareness, said, write that letter one more time.
Write that letter one more time.
Because that's important. To me, that I really think, because you've already been, if you died, they turned you down, you never heard from them again, and suddenly you're going to write again.
I did, and actually, right after I got the degree with Marie, I went and put a rose on her tomb right after getting that.
How long?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
How long was it from that point, which you wrote them, till you got an answer?
Oh, days. I mean, an immediate answer. So I wrote the president, the provost contacted me within days. The Gender Equity Title IX head gave me 2 hours of interviews on the phone. And then all those decades, I hadn't even looked at it in between. I carried my 475 pages of research around with me. And they said, well, digitize it and send it in. And it was, I didn't even know how to digitize it. My son's a digital animator. He came in and helped me, but I was so overwhelmed with this process. I actually ended up at the one point in the ER with aphasia. It was like, oh my God, I'm a graduate student. And they set up a committee. And they started asking me questions. Whose handwriting is on this page? Where are the breakthroughs in your research?
I want you to read a letter, if you don't mind.
No.
I was going to read it, but I think it's coming from you. It's going to be better. of the letter you received after you went through that, after the
Yes.
committee, after they questioned you, after you showed them research you'd had for 40 years or 48 years.
Right.
We're at the 48-year mark from the time they denied until the time you get a letter.
It's true.
And this is the important part in the show, folks. Would you read the letter?
I was amazed by this letter. It was so clean, their response to me. So they
Listen
said,
to her words. It was clean. This is coming later.
Dear Miss Dembe, so I'd written, thank you for your letter of April 7th, 2018. They sent this to me in July. Following your correspondence with the Department of Chemistry at the University of Chicago in 2000, we regret that the university did not respond to your request 18 years ago, and regret still more that your difficulties while you were a student in our department were handled with such negligence. Period. No buts.
Yeah, no buts.
We thank you for your persistence in writing again, and especially for presenting us with an opportunity to partially rectify these mistakes of the past. The Department of Chemistry is pleased to report that the university has agreed that the degree of PhD should be awarded to you at the end of this summer quarter. I would like to congratulate you and invite you to participate in the next convocation on June 15th, 2019. We would be honored if you would allow the department to cover your travel expenses to Chicago for the event.
Congratulations, Sundari! Yeah, right.
And they even paid for my children to watch me.
This is an astonishing story. Before I go to the next section, and I've flown through this because I really want to concentrate on the next section. At this point in time, I know, and this show and others, you've got an interview, I think, lined up with NPR. There could be some other. Do you see a ball rolling here where you're going to be known?
I've been amazed at the response. I've got about 12 speaking engagements now. 6 days after I graduated, I spoke to 500 scientists at Stanford, a Nobel laureate keynote on Saturday, and I was keynote Sunday. I'm speaking to the American Chemical Society at UC Berkeley in September, and American Association of University Women, and the University of Chicago is flying me back there to speak.
Well, we reached the point. We get to the good stuff as far as I'm concerned. That is amazing. It's about your book, and it's about 4 steps that you talk about. And the 4 steps are what you used, I know, to write to the University of Chicago. Very carefully, constructed in a benevolent way, and I know your book is about this as well. I want you to take some time. I want you to give us those 4 steps and inform us what is it that you want to say.
Right. Well, I used a very conscious method to approach Chicago, and I see this as a method that would work for anyone feeling unjustly treated, for like African American communities and police forces, for #MeToo issues, for equity issues, for Democrats, for Republicans talking to each other. So first, I approached them with no anger. I approached them as an institution with the integrity of wanting to correct an error. And my believing in them allowed them to step up into their best, and for me to be in my best with them. So secondly, what I did was I gave them the power by giving them 3 choices of solutions that would satisfy me in this situation. I said, either give me my degree or give me an honorary degree if you can't do that, or I have a lot of, I couldn't research in the way I wanted to, so I researched life. And so there are a lot of scientific theories in that book of mine. And I said, perhaps you can use my book as a thesis. And then that gives them the power to feel good about themselves third, and me to feel good about myself together. We can join with each other then in feeling the integrity, and I really do. I feel their integrity, my integrity. I felt an acknowledgement between us. The fact that there's always a win-win situation available is really number three. And fourth is in order to do that, I had to give up outcome. Not that I didn't want an outcome, but I had to give up the attachment to the outcome so that I could still see myself living a good life, and I did live a good life, whether or not that happened. And in fact, if I could choose whether to have gotten the degree back then or whether to get it now, this is a lot more fun. And I think... And I think in the worst of situations, there's really a gift for each of us if we can, change the perceptual frame to see that. So that was what I did with them.
Give me the name of your book again.
The Choice of Happiness, Glimpses from an Extraordinary, Ordinary, Scientific, Mystical Life.
Oh, wow.
On Amazon.
Yeah, on Amazon. How do we apply that to our lives? Like every day? I know I'm now getting into things that you didn't expect me to ask and whatever. I mean, to me, it's obvious.
There's a way to live in gratitude and in joining.
Thank you.
I think no matter how hurt one is in a situation, that the other person is always coming from some space of innocence. And at any moment, we can choose to focus on the darkness or focus on the light of the situation in front of us, of the chaos of society, of the person who has wronged us, or we can choose to see, if I had created this for myself on my cosmic dance card of life, what gift could I possibly have given myself? And even if it's not the right one, it opens a doorway in one's own beingness to gratitude and to benevolence that you spoke so beautifully about the last time I was in the choir in Bulgaria. Yeah.
I want to know what it felt like at the graduation. Did you wear a cap and gown?
Oh, I wore, the cap and gown is very dramatic.
Yes.
It's for the doctorate.
For a doctorate?
It's this maroon, velvet blue, extraordinary. So, and they paid for everything. I mean, umbrellas, they paid for, this cap and gown
I'm sorry, I'm ignorant. Do you use an umbrella when you get a PhD?
It's outside on the quad, and it did rain.
And it rained, okay, fine. I just wanted to clear that up.
A little while,
Yeah.
and it was useful. And they gave me hour meetings with the president and the provost, NPR following me around getting quotes. And they couldn't have been kinder and more acknowledging and more affirming. And for someone who's gone all my life thinking I hadn't made it, what I've really learned is this world is an illusion. There's no order of difficulty in miracles. And in believing those two things, I can play with it because it's still so hard to wrap around me. I mean, it's so hard to even know my name. Cheryl was my scientific name. Sundari is what I've been going. I mean, I don't know who I am anymore, and
I don't
need to.
There's no order to difficulty in miracles.
There's no order of difficulty in miracles, right?
It kind of sounds like what Kryon says. Right?
We might have some resonance.
We might
there.
have some resonance there. Thank you so much.
Thank you
for being
so
with
much.
us.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
So what we do now, these free shows have a channeling. It's not a long one, but we do get a Kryon channeling. And we don't always do that. So if you want to just sit there and enjoy, we're going to just go into that now. For those who don't know, when I channel, I take off my watch. I take off my glasses because I shut my eyes and there's nothing to see. But I take off my watch because I drain batteries, and I learned that long ago, that while I'm channeling, this thing gets drained. I have the same thing with wireless microphones, and that was the sound of our audio technician. Oy vey. And it's true. And when I've had one particular big conference in France where I drained it repeatedly before they gave me a microphone with a wire where they finally believed it. But the watch is supposed to have a battery that lasts a couple of years, and it just doesn't. So I take it off when I channel, so I'll make sure that it continues. I don't understand why, and maybe someday that will be obvious what goes on. Well, I'm just pleased that I can do this, and right now there's going to be what I'll call a mini channeling. So just if you're at home watching this, and which most are, or here in the audience, just relax for a moment, and we'll get on with it. Greetings, dear ones. I am Kryon of Magnetic Service. Perhaps this is the first time you've seen this. For 30 years, my partner has known what this feels like. Where he literally steps away and goes to another place, but listens in. It has taken a long time for him to be comfortable with such a thing. But dear ones, this is the time to understand that there is a lot more to you than just you. That there may be a connection to your soul that you haven't been told about. You haven't been told about it because this comes from what you would call the mystery schools. Is it possible that human consciousness can go through a barrier and touch that face of God that is in every single one of you, represented in that which you call your soul? Is that soul, which all religions believe in, is that soul available, or does it just go for a ride with you while you're on earth? Is it possible that with the evolvement of humanity and the consciousness change that is starting to occur on this planet, that perhaps, just perhaps, there starts to be a meld, a connection? And if there is, how would it look to you? How would it present itself in your society? Questions: would it happen only to those who are introspective in metaphysics, or everyone? I'll tell you, this is humanity-wide. The evolvement of consciousness is upon you. And if I'm right, you're going to see it everywhere. But the first places you see it are non-organized, and that would be within everyday life of what human beings want, what they applaud, the differences in yesterday and today, in their outlook of what is believed possible or not possible. Organized things such as corporate politics, businesses, that's going to come later, and it always happens this way. But first you're going to see it in ordinary humanity, in your culture. I want this channel not to stand alone. And what this means to my partner is that I don't want him to isolate this channel and have somebody hear it. I want it always to accompany that presentation which has just occurred. Because that is the crux of everything we teach. Something is happening. And that's something you may say, well, it's represented in what regular humanity will tolerate, and what it will say is the line of demarcation of that which is accepted or not accepted. And that line is moving. It's moving, dear ones, to a place where things that used to be happening on this planet that were intolerable but never mentioned are starting to show. And the reaction of so many is on your news almost every day. You're finding out things that have always happened, but now they're important. They're important enough for people to come forward and say, this is going on or that is going on. Where 20 years ago, 30 years ago, maybe even more, it was always going on and you were told, be quiet. And it's not just a gender issue, dear ones, it's an integrity issue with humans. So the integrity of humanity is starting to evolve in front of you. You can see it especially in the first world countries, where you can speak of it without having any kind of danger. This is starting to happen all through your culture. But the reason I mention this now is because of what you've just seen. Sundari speaks of 4 steps. And she talks about those steps being the way you would approach even things that you felt in the past were injustice. It speaks not only of her experience with that which was an institution, but personally, everyday life. Somebody perhaps who's done wrong things to you or things that are unforgivable to you, or those who just perhaps have angered you. And you, all your life, have learned a way to react to that. And it's what your parents have taught you, what their parents taught them. What if that very paradigm starts to change? And we use the word benevolence because you are benevolent creatures. You have inside you, each one, that which is the Creator, the face of God, the image of the Creator. If you don't like the word God, use Creator. Almost everyone on this planet believes you've come from somewhere else. Almost everyone on this planet, regardless of belief system, believes you're going someplace else when you go through your transition. So there is the acknowledgement of coming from some kind of creative source that's bigger than you and returning back to that. And so in that we address the obvious. While you're here, does it make sense that it would hide from you? And the answer is no. Spiritual logic would say that as you become more aware and a higher conscious attitude of evolvement, things are going to start changing at the baseline, systemically, of what you call your culture. And you start to see benevolence. And you start to see that which is how you would treat each other. And when somebody pushes you, instead of being angry and pushing them back, this is where it starts. Is your then awareness of what they're going through as they push you. All of these things, dear ones, learned step by step, for they are so new. The paradigms that you are about to start working with, that some of you who are in this audience and listening already are participating in, are new. They're new to almost everyone else around you. And the only way they're going to see them is when you do them. The only way they're going to see them is when you do them. It is such a learning experience. When you face off with another human being and they're so angry and they expect a certain interchange, and what they get from you is understanding and compassion and benevolence. They don't expect it. They don't know what to say. Not only does it disarm the anger, but it brings them to a place where they might actually understand what you're saying. It might end up where they're just quiet and they don't know what to say. And you walk away. But there's been no angry interchange. There's only been love. And believe me, that is an enormous energy. Enormous energy. That's the teaching of the day. That is what Sundari used in this amazing story that you have just seen on this beautiful show. Is it possible that that's where it's going with humanity? That it's not just a onesie or a one-off, as they say. As you listen to her talk, as you have the presentation of her 4 steps of benevolence, And I'm telling you, it's catchy. This is where it's going. You'll see this. History will talk about the change someday, when humans started to treat each other differently. And the result was no more war on Earth. This is where it's going. I am Kryon of Magnetic Service, in love with humanity. And so it is. Thank you, folks. Thank you, Sundari. We'll be back.